Today on the show, we learn how far we're willing to go to take on an empire. Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and themes of our favorite universes. I'm Kevin.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Jaden. Alright guys, when you think of the Rebel Alliance, you think of beautiful figures that inspire you, like Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, Admiral Akbar. They all bring up romantic feelings, especially Akbar for Kevin. But those people are not the ones we're going to be talking about today. Those people are the good guys. We're going to be talking about the morally questionable guys who make up the backbone of the early rebellion. The ones who have to do the dirty work so that the heroes can blow up the Death Star and save the day.
I'm glad we're finally, shedding light on the shadowy figures that make it all possible, that kind of do the unglamorous parts of, waging an uprising against a brutal regime. Because I think we all know on some level that a war like that, it's an ugly business. And the mainline Star Wars movies put kind of a handsome face on that ugly business sometimes.
Absolutely. Not that the subject of our podcast isn't handsome, because he is quite a looker.
Oh, perish the thought.
Very, very
perish
good
the thought. Yeah, absolutely. Diego Luna.
Oh, man.
Ooh. I just think that Star Wars itself, like some other types of stories, are very 1 or 0. It's either very good or they're very evil. And I think the gray area in between and just the anti-hero is a lot more interesting and a lot more intricate of a story and a character to tell rather than, they're always going to be good, they're always going to be bad, they're always going to have that code that they follow or something like that. And I think there's a lot more leeway to have an interesting story with a character like this.
Absolutely. And so if you guys haven't guessed already, we are talking about Cassian Andor, the title character for the show Andor that is premiering on Disney Plus very, very soon. We saw how much fun everybody had doing the Kenobi show, and the feedback we got from it was great. So we decided, hey, why not try it one more time, but with a character that not a lot of people know about? So that's what the goal of today's episode is, to take a look at his story, where he comes from, what may have influenced his thoughts and opinions growing up, and finally, what our thoughts of what is going to be included in the Andor show.
So before we get into it, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So as per usual, we love to hear from you guys, our listeners. So shoot us an email at podcast@loreparty.com with all your thoughts and episode ideas. We got a lot of feedback on Kenobi, and we really enjoyed hearing what everybody had to say. So keep it coming, keep it coming. And of course, our teams are streaming weekly on Twitch, so be sure to follow us on twitch.tv/lore_party. And of course, we are all on the social medias, so you can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at @lore_party.
All right, now that that's out of the way, we are going to dive right in to talking about Andor, his origins, and where we think he's going to end up at the end of his series. But first, let's break for an ad. Stick around. Okay, now that that's out of the way, now we get to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Cassian Andor.
Who is Cassian Andor, though?
Oh, that's a very good question.
I feel like there's a swath of people, maybe not a huge one, but some people out there who maybe didn't watch one particular Star Wars movie, and so they're completely in the dark about this guy. Because he hasn't had a whole lot of exposure.
It's the best Star Wars movie.
I agree.
Far the best.
It's a big mistake to miss this one. Yeah, I am on record as giving Disney a lot of guff, if I can use that old word, with their treatment of the Star Wars license. Rented mule is a phrase that comes to mind. But I think that Rogue One, they nailed it. They hit it out of the park with this one.
Big time.
And
Baba Booey.
By far, yeah.
all the characters, and the best part is like the characters did the exact opposite of what I thought they were gonna do. Like literally, I saw the cast list and I went, "Oh wow, 8 new characters, huh? That's 8 new toys that we're gonna buy for the next 20 years." And then the movie happened, and I was like, "Oh wow, we will never see them again."
So, spoiler heavy episode. Spoiler heavy episode here. Just keep that in mind. If you have not seen Rogue One, I highly recommend you just hit pause, go watch Rogue One, go cry for a while, and then come back.
Yeah, pause right now, go watch it. You're missing out otherwise.
And okay, we're good. Now, they all died. It was horrible. You got a chance. You got a chance, listener.
It like to your point, Jaden. There was definitely a curveball. Like that's not the usual Star Wars formula.
No.
You know, we're used to seeing a new generation of heroes that have plot armor, and you know they're gonna be around a while. But with Rogue One, it's like a very, very different way to tell a story with very disposable characters. Exactly, stormtroopers like were accurate. Explosions and the Death Star, and just characters who were disposable. Like they serve their purpose in that story, and their part in it is done. Including, unfortunately, our subject today, Cassian Andor. We see the end of his journey, basically.
Absolutely.
In Rogue One.
But that's a great way to segue into the beginning of his journey. And
exactly,
I don't think there's any place that you can start without mentioning like one of his most iconic lines from Rogue One. "I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old."
That is cold. That's a cold line.
It's a cold
That's
line.
It's sad to think about.
It's a really sad line. And looking into his character, the timeline of that really didn't add up. So I found out that Cassian, he was born on a planet called Fest. It was a mountainous, cold world out in the Outer Rim. And this was not a planet that was controlled by the Empire. The Empire didn't exist yet. Nor was it a Republic world. It was in fact a planet that had pledged its loyalty to the Confederacy of Independent Systems, better known as the Separatists. That's awesome. That means that Cassian Andor, the fight that he's been in since he was 6, has been against 2 different regimes. The Republic and the Empire.
He just hates everybody.
He just hates everyone.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people forget is the Outer Rim planets that a lot of the fighting in the Clone Wars took place on. Like they're so far from Republic control that a lot of them just don't even really align with the Republic at all.
No.
So, I mean, most of us see the Republic, especially in the Clone Wars era, as those are the good guys. Why would anyone fight them? But like where Cassian grew up, they were just these random goons that no one really had any loyalty to. So of course he would see them as stormtroopers before they were really stormtroopers.
You know, the Confederacy of Independent Systems, most of the worlds that were involved in that rebellion, which it was a rebellion, they saw Coruscant as this like bloated, outdated bureaucracy, whereas the corporations that kind of controlled the Confederacy, they were the ones that were bringing the jobs, they were bringing the food, the freedom, and the security in their minds. So they thought, these are the guys that are going to back me up. And the best part is, we don't even have to do any of the fighting because the Confederacy is providing battle droids to do all the fighting for us.
Yep.
Right.
Which, hey, like, that's a great deal. You don't even have to die. Someone else is going to do the fighting for you, and you're going to, like, that's a no-risk rebellion. Unfortunately, some of those worlds didn't actually get out of the way of the Republic's retaliation for the rebellion, and they found themselves having to form resistance cells and ad hoc military units.
Yeah, just being, like, in this position of, you're not a trained soldier. You're just some kid, literally a kid in Cassian's case, just living on this backwater planet, middle of nowhere. And yeah, you've relied on the Confederacy or the corporations, Trade Federation, Banking Guild, whatever it is, for your food, your shelter, your way of life for so long, and then suddenly, you're expected to take part in this war. Like, as far as you're concerned, again, like we could touch on this, like, but as far as you're concerned, the Republic brought this war to your planet. Like, everything was fine before they came along. So, and becoming a citizen army like this, and like one of the early resistance cells in the galaxy, that's That's a brutal way to bring the war to a civilian population. That's never pretty.
No,
And that's going to shape the life of people like Cassian for the worse. I think.
Even with the Separatists' massive droid manufacturing facilities, we really they didn't have enough forces to cover the entire outer rim. So a lot of times the planets, they actually had to defend themselves, and you get brilliant arcs in the Star Wars: The Clone Wars with Umbara. It's a great example. You don't see you see very few, if any, battle droids throughout the entire arc. I don't even think you see any on the planet. And the Republic forces, they come in and they are only fighting the natives, and it is a brutal conquest.
Now, I want you to remember this, though, too. We are talking about somebody who is a child soldier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I personally say a lot of the Jedi, sometimes some of those children, now they weren't thrown into battle, but I think sometimes if they did have to, they could be considered child soldiers.
Nonsense, Kevin. It was an internship. I signed a permission slip.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
They're just space monks. But really, he is a child soldier. So think about everything in his mind when he goes through things he says and everything that he's been through. We're going to go over that. But starting at 6, remember, 6 years old. So this is a bit intense, especially for a 6-year-old.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like being in charge of missions as a barely out of your infancy, and you have to throw rocks and bottles at clones and their tanks.
Yeah,
and
his first assignments, and I say that with air quotes, is basically just go be a nuisance, be a shithead kid to these clones.
And it's so messed up to think about the fact that the clones are there to the clone troopers, they think they're there to liberate these people, and they end up being their opponents. You're there to bring this planet back into the Republic, and you end up just mostly killing its natives. Yep. Not even battle droids.
Natives that didn't even want to be a part of the Republic in the first place. You gotta remember,
they just want you to leave.
I've always said this, if the Republic is so good, why is there still slavery in the galaxy? If they're so good at providing comfort and security, then something that shouldn't be a thing.
I agree. Anakin would not have been a child slave.
Which I always love Qui-Gon's take on that, where it's he's just this galaxy's a big place, man. What do you want from us? It's what do you mean?
It's kind of like he'd probably say, well, you got to blame the Hutts for that one. This is technically Hutt space, and it's always passing the buck.
Blame.
That's how it goes. But
constantly.
Oh well.
But to get us back on topic, when Cassian, he's growing up in this environment. And unfortunately, sometimes when you're fighting the good fight in your head, you don't win. As we know, the Separatists lost. And when they lost, there was a lot of resentment for the native populations of these worlds, because most of the fighting was still done by droids. And a lot of the smaller worlds, they never really suffered a lot of, personal loss. A lot when it comes to war, most of the time you'll know someone who goes off to battle and doesn't come home, but they didn't even have that. Didn't even happen for them. The war happened on another planet, and then they got a letter saying, "Hey, by the way, we lost." And so there's this mindset of the people on the planet that was basically we weren't defeated, we didn't lose, our leadership failed us.
Yeah,
and this is the exact. It's very similar to the attitude that German citizens felt at the end of World War I, because from what they knew from their propaganda, the war was going great until one day, all of a sudden, it wasn't. And that was the same case here. The Separatists were everything's fine. Please just keep sending us raw materials. And then all of a sudden, there was no return button when they hit. They're hey, hit send. Nothing. Where's it going?
Yeah.
Mustafar. I've never heard of Mustafar. Weird.
You're just left holding the bag at the end of the day, and it's we did nothing wrong, we just defended our home, and suddenly there's this power vacuum. Suddenly we've been conquered. It's what did we do to deserve this? We kept up the fight. We weren't technically beaten. We just it's just new administration. Basically it's just we're changing the signs on the front door. Our old masters are now dudes in white helmets and Jedi back on Coruscant and senators and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, nothing really materially changes for us. It's just a matter of window dressing and titles. That's really it. And so they're still suffering.
To them, the overlords, if you will, it just changes. The power vacuum just gets filled continuously, and it just never changes, and it's always going to be this oppressive force. So to them, they just want to protect their home, whether it's their independence or representation, whatever. They don't want to be controlled by anybody outside of them.
Yes.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it seems like they kind of keep getting, unfortunately, the new regime of, what takes over after the Clone Wars, it gets even worse from there, apparently.
These worlds that have been freshly conquered found themselves being brutally oppressed by the new regime. We see this in the book Lost Stars. If you've read that, we see it. These worlds are they're fine. They lost, and then all of a sudden, the Empire walks in and lays all these new rules down. In an episode of The Bad Batch, we see that all citizens are suddenly required to register their identity and turn over all of their money in exchange for Imperial credits. Massive amounts of private land is confiscated in order to build these giant government domes on cities. Every city, every planet has a city where they just build this giant monolith to the Empire just to remind the people that they are no longer independent, that they serve at the pleasure of the Empire. And if you speak out against that, you're gone. They take you away and they shove you into the spice mines of Kessel or some other horrible Imperial prison camp. Yeah,
it really is like, such a harsh awakening for a kid like Cassian, who grew up among conflict to begin with. So it's not like he had an easy life to begin with, but I don't think even he could have expected, like, hey, the Republic that's kind of coming in and bringing war to our doorstep. I'm sorry to say, but it gets even worse from there. Like, the Empire, like, is a whole nother level.
That Republic was willing to lie to your face and tell you that they were better. Yeah. And then that Republic died, and they dropped the facade. They're like, nope, you serve. All citizens of the Empire serve the Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, just the thought of, like, the space gulag, like, that for a kid and then for a people. I just keep thinking about how, for them, they were fighting against those that took over. Like, it's just the mindset of thinking, like, oh, we think the Republic is bad. They just got defeated by somebody even worse. And the thought process of, like, oh my God, maybe we shouldn't have been fighting them, or maybe we should have tried to not just fight them. Maybe we should talk to them. Maybe like I don't know. I feel like this was a planet that was taken advantage of by the Separatists. And they themselves were like a pawn in this whole scheme for the Empire to become the Empire. And I don't know if they know that specifically, but I think that if they do, that probably feels even worse to realize, oh my God, our freedom, our fighting back against what we believe is tyranny was used against us. Our naivety and all that stuff was used against not just us, but then it was also technically, it was used against the entire rest of the galaxy, and that's gotta feel pretty shitty.
They used tyranny to fight the tyranny that turns out wasn't tyranny. It was...
Yeah.
It's realizing that your independent spirit and your desire for liberty was taken advantage of by corporations who were using you as meat shields, basically. But it also, like, double whammy. It turns out it would have been useless anyway because the Republic that came to, quote unquote, liberate you they just turned into the Empire. So it was kind of a lose-lose. And, but I guess you could say luckily, or for one way or the other, Cassian, he's grown up as a child soldier. He's like, as bad as that upbringing is, it at least toughens him. Yeah. And he doesn't take this situation lying down at all. He keeps fighting back.
He joins resistance cell after resistance cell. This is not the rebellion that we come to know in episode 4 and 5. This is a bunch of Lycan rebels, a bunch of like-minded individuals. They all hop on a ship or find an abandoned, hollowed-out moon base, and they do whatever little disruptions they can. Stealing supplies, blowing up ships, helping prisoners escape, whatever they can do to make the Empire think twice about causing unmitigated destruction. And luckily for him, his efforts were noticed. He was recruited by General Draven, who is the head of the Alliance intelligence network. And it's basically Andor slowly realizes that, hey, there are more people like me out here who believe that the Empire is evil. And because of that, I actually think that there's a chance to make a difference. So he signs up to become an intelligence agent, which is not easy in today's world. Imagine a world with jetpacks and lasers and holograms. They got your face.
A galaxy with millions of planets in it and like a lot of people to connect and, network with and gather information from. You got your work cut out for you. And also with a galaxy spanning empire, if you step the wrong direction, they bring the hammer down on you. It's a life of danger and darkness and terror.
Also, there's no dental.
That's
I also think as well the fact that now they see what true tyranny is, and so it almost encourages them to fight back even more, because they've already been doing it for so long, and to them they realize that they were not actually fighting the oppressive force. This one is, of course, like we said earlier, it's way worse, and they have experience in this kind of thing, and I don't really think that the Alliance, those in the Alliance, we have seen a lot of them, they kind of led some cushy lives, and this is the group of people that didn't, and this is the group of people that have been fighting the majority of their lives, and they know what it takes to actually be in those trenches rather than in, Coruscant just kind of like making back-end deals and all this other stuff.
I mean, I would say that's true for maybe the leadership of the rebellion, but to borrow and paraphrase a quote from an old Legends book, it was like the rebellion was filled with starry-eyed farm boys like Luke Skywalker before the Empire fell, because that's they're not all the rich guys, although those can help. Looks over at Bail Organa.
But this
I was just about to
this group of people, I would say these are the beginnings of that, and these are the people that have already had that experience, and so they bring a lot to the table comparatively to the politicians that were kind of starting to do this.
I think before you can build yourself up into an organized strategic insurgency that actually makes a high level difference, you have to start with this kind of grassroots, really just individuals making the choice on their own to disobey, to not conform to the new system, to fight back in the little ways however they can. And that escalates into like we kind of talk about this raw, gritty, down to the ground level type of rebellion where people are just getting their hands dirty. I think there's a great example in Rogue One, actually, when we first meet Cassian.
Yeah, that actually is a really good segue. He meets one of his contacts, and when they're cornered, instead of a valiant last stand, befitting a hero as like Star Wars would show, Cassian just shoots him in the back in cold blood and just is like, I'm going to avoid capture. No, fuck this. No way, man. Like, it's much more down to, I don't want to say Earth, but sure, we're down to Terra, whatever you want to call it, down to Coruscant. He's very like, no. None of this bullshit. It's not about heroes. This is about survival.
I mean, he knows what happens to that guy, too. If he gets captured, he's going to get tortured to death.
Exactly.
It's kind of like doing them both a favor. Like, I'm going to save you torture. I'm going to save my own life. And like that, this is how it has to go down. And it's like there are, we mentioned Bail Organa earlier. I think that's worth repeating, is just the sense of there were the leadership types who had the kind of lofty ideals in terms of opposing the Empire the quote unquote right way. I will lead from the Senate and I will gather support and resources, and we'll do this proper. We'll form a proper military. But then on the flip side of that, you have Cassian just like, I'm going to gather the dirt. I'm going to go into the dark, seedy underbelly of the galaxy, and I'll do what I have to stay alive, fight back however I can. Yeah. And it's the two sides of the coin.
It's not about blowing up Death Stars sometimes. Sometimes you got to blackmail them off or shoot a senator. Right. You gotta get some stuff done, man.
And that's what I mean earlier about like the senators and the politicians. They're even them creating like a rebellion still feels kind of Star Wars operatic, there's honor in this, and we're going to gather the politicians and the senators, and we're going to get more information, and we're going to fight back with the law. Like, no, fuck that. It doesn't work. These are the guys that really know what the hell's going on, Yeah.
Well, I disagree. Right. I do have to say, to your point, there's a great book that came out to accompany Rogue One, and it listed off some of the Rebellion Council, and one of them was like the Minister for Education and Civil Rights, and I was like, oh, that's cute.
Interesting.
You guys are rebellion. Or it was like you have a school teacher for the rebellion. You don't even have a core world yet, and you're already thinking about like types. The infrastructure afterwards.
Yeah, thinking ahead. I guess by the time we sort of really meet Cassian for the first time, he has been, getting his hands dirty for decades, for most of his life, as he's basically seen the rebellion be born from like we talked about, the grassroots of just individual action to small networks that sort of start to slowly coalesce together until you eventually have the fully fledged Rebel Alliance. But I think we start seeing in Rogue One, when we meet Cassian for the first time officially, we start seeing that rebellion, the quote-unquote Rebel Alliance, or I guess officially the Alliance to Restore the Republic, they kind of, now that they have an official name, an official, like, a charter and, like, leadership and structure and all that, they start to look backwards and look at their origins, and they cringe a little bit like, oh, yeah, we had some rough years at the beginning there where we crossed some lines and, obviously did what we had to do for the sake of freedom and, liberating the galaxy. But I think we start seeing the Rebel Alliance start to disavow some of the actions of the more extreme, I guess, like partisans and, ground level operatives, the cells who really make things happen on the ground. I guess one example would be Saw Gerrera. He's another character we meet in Rogue One. And he's also one of those early rebel operators who...
He's actually a very interesting foil for Cassian because he was an insurgent during the Clone Wars, but he fought for the Republic against the Separatists on his planet. He wasn't as young as Cassian was, but he was, I think, 16, 17 when the Separatists invaded his home world. So he's on the other side where he saw war as well.
Look, everybody just needed a common enemy.
Yeah.
That's all they needed. Just a common enemy.
Well, and his path took a much darker direction than even Cassian could have imagined. He was fine with bombing civilian targets, Moff's families. He didn't care. He was just like, yep, if you benefit from the Empire, you must learn to fear the rebellion. And
yeah, no holds barred.
And the rest of the Rebel Council was like, let's not be as bad as the Empire, okay?
Let's tone it down a little.
Tone it down a notch. How about only 2 thermal detonators in that building over there?
We're not going to use their examples as what we will do. Let's just look at them as examples of what we shouldn't do.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like winning matters, but how we win also matters is kind of the line that gets drawn. So, rebels or partisans or insurgents or what have you, like Saw Gerrera, they typically get labeled basically little more than terrorists by the rebellion leadership. So you start seeing these distinctions, and I'm hoping the Andor series shows us a little bit more of those gray areas between the heroic ideals that I think the original trilogy kind of had us growing up with, the hero rebels, and then you have the morally ambiguous, really just killing whoever they have to, rebels.
I mean, sidestep from this, I also think that's why a lot of people liked Han Solo in the first movie, especially whole Han Solo shoots first kind of situation, because it was like, this guy is supposed to be scum, and that's the whole point. Is they, I guess you could say he's turned from scum to hero, blah blah blah, whatever. Throw that aside. The origin is that he's a piece of shit, and he's kind of a piece of shit like these guys. He's just a goofy piece of shit,
To borrow a line from Firefly, I love Malcolm Reynolds when he says, "Because I'm the good guy," and then he stabs someone. And he goes, "All right, I'm okay."
Maybe I'm just
just okay.
Guy, yeah, I'm all right. No, absolutely.
And I think this is a good point to stop. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to roll our last ad. And then we're going to talk about what we expect from the show Andor. Not the man, the show. All right, we're back. Now that we've talked about who Cassian is, we can talk about where he's going to end up. Of course, we already know where his story ends, but we don't know where the story of the show is going to end.
That's right. Yeah, we'll hopefully get a better understanding of kind of what he had been up to prior to the events of Rogue One. Maybe we'll see a bit more of his history. So far, we know of his childhood, I guess, or at least we have hints of it. So we might get some more background on, how he grew up, how he sort of got into the Resistance line of work. And, I'm hoping that through his eyes, we'll kind of watch the Rebel network sort of start to grow and blossom and become the alliance that it becomes later. So, there's a lot of possibilities in terms of the kinds of stories we'll see, the types of people we'll meet throughout his travels, and just, I'm just glad that one thing that Rogue One did really well was really center the normal people of the galaxy as the heroes, like the working stiffs and the grunts on the ground who really get the job done. Like there no Jedi in Rogue One. Basically, that's the big departure, and the difference that I think was its strength was really centering the normal people. And I'm optimistic that Andor kind of continues that tradition of, let's set the Jedi aside. They have plenty of their own stories. Let's talk about just the normal people struggling to get by.
I'm excited to see, because we know that it's going to be, and like you said, Andor is going to be helping the rebellion to create and establish all these resistant networks, right? So like the path, like we saw that in Obi-Wan. We're going to start seeing a lot more of that kind of stuff, but a little bit more intense, focusing on, gathering intelligence and fighting back and on specific planets and what we can do, moving resources. It's going to be much more thorough and fleshed out on how to do it. And I think it's cool that this is the guy to do it because of his background.
Yes.
I am much more excited to see the darker aspects of this, though. Like I want to see what it takes and by what means they're going to go. How far are you going to go to really establish this one network to gather this intelligence? Do you have to murder all these people? Like, I want to know. I want to see these decisions. I want to see those things.
I mean, off the top of my head, I would love to see them do an arc where it's like they know of a Moff on a certain planet who controls, say, medical shipments to the Outer Rim. So Andor goes and has a meeting with him, pretending to be like a diplomat. And instead of him like agreeing to sell the stuff outright because he's a corrupt politician, they then have to go and get blackmail evidence against him. That would be really cool, where it's like, you're going to ruin this guy's life. Are you willing to do that? Yes, I am, for the supplies.
Yep.
That would be a really interesting scenario, at least in my head. And I think it's cool because they've basically confirmed that this show's going to have a bunch of seasons.
No, that's exciting. Like multiple seasons, multiple opportunities to set up like entire arcs, entire like spy dramas that can play out over the course of a season. That's pretty cool.
I even saw rumors that Andor himself might not even be the main character at a certain point afterwards, because I guess they've planned out like the first 5 seasons or so. I read a variety article that they already have season 2 is filming in November. So they've got like 5, but apparently they've got like 5 seasons planned, and each one will be like a year leading up to Rogue One. But wow. I think they're thinking like maybe the characters that they established will be able to carry on after after Rogue One.
Interesting.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be kind of like,
which would be kind of like the Rebels series.
Yeah, I would say Rebels or Game of Thrones, where it's like, nah, Ned Stark's not here anymore.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what facets as well, like, of the rebellion are portrayed here in this time frame. Like, I really want to know which, like I said, like the politicians, right? Like, I want to see them and then how they interact with his group. Like, I want to see those interactions of creating the rebellion and the conflicts within that, because that I think is a lot more interesting, because you have to be on the same page if you're gonna.
You always, when you're building when you're building something like this, you always have to make sure your message is coherent and sound, and you're all speaking in the same voice. Because if you don't, it peters out.
And the other thing too is you need to be able to trust people. You need to be able to trust people. So, like, if I don't 100% trust, this party, and I give them some information because I want them to join, if they don't agree with that, what if they want to take my side out because they think we would be a burden to their, their fight, you know? So they could leak that information, then my group could get destroyed because this other group wants to fight it a different way, and I would be in the way,
Yeah, infighting would be. Yeah, if we saw infighting between different, like, kind of ideologically opposed rebel cells, that would be amazing. That'd be cool. Such a cool, unexpected way to tell that story. Because, like we've talked about, or like we've established, the Rebel Alliance is not an army yet, not even close. It's like, it's an insurgency. It's like a spy ring, which means it needs a lot of OPSEC, operational security. Like, if word gets out about something to the wrong ears, you're all screwed. And, like, maybe a cell, that's why you operate in cells. Like, if one group goes down, the other one can take over.
Exactly.
So it'd be a completely different game we'd be watching.
Well, and
out.
To the credit of the senators who ended up taking over the rebellion as, like, the leadership council, I think they did a hell of a job better than what Saw Gerrera would have done. Saw Gerrera would have gone out in a blaze of glory. He would have launched as many ships as he could have at, like, the biggest target he could find, and lost.
Thinking short term.
He would have lost all of his men, attacking the Kuat shipyards. It's like, cool, you blew up like one Star Destroyer manufacturing plant, but you got everyone killed.
Yeah, we got to keep in mind the timeline here of, like, the Rebel fleet isn't really in a position to pose any kind of threat to the Empire, even up until episode 6, like when the Battle of Endor, like. And when we see in Rogue One, like, the majority of the Rebel fleet kind of shows up at Scarif, that's a huge gamble. And
they lose a lot of it. I mean, there's literally an episode of Rebels where getting their hands on a dozen Y-wings is like a great victory for the rebellion.
Yeah,
like, that's how desperate they are, even like a year before the Battle of Scarif and Yavin. And that's why there's only 30 ships at the Battle of Yavin, because the rest of them scattered after Scarif. The fleet was thrown to the wind because they were like, all right, we got the plans. Everyone jump, run.
Get the hell out of here. Yeah, no, I think the desperation of that situation will be interesting to watch. And like I've said, especially from the eyes of non-space wizards, people who aren't, like, they don't have the main character plot armor necessarily. They are just on the ground. They live in the dirt and scrape by. So no, it'll be a different world for sure.
Maybe we do see some Jedi that have been smuggled out by the Path. That's a new leadership or a new faction that's been shown. That'd be cool. Like, heck, we could get like maybe a Jedi who's a drunk. He's like super, or like he's a high on death sticks, and like he's just this bad actor, and he's like, no, I'm still a Jedi. It's like, no, man, you're messed up. We're not gonna let you that. Oh, that would be a great storyline. They find a Jedi, but he is messed up in the head, and they're like, we can't make him the face of the rebellion. Like maybe you have a leader who's like, we found a Jedi, dude. This is so great, and it's like that Jedi's like the worst, and they're like, we can't Guys, we can't.
Not him. Nah,
he won't inspire people. He'll make everyone sad.
I don't want to hope too hard. I don't want to get my hopes too high over like thinking about, I don't know, Cal Kestis as a crossover.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there. Like,
you've gotten you've done it. You said
sweet,
the name.
But...
You've already done it. I know you said you didn't want to do it, but you did it. But now I'm excited.
I know. I've cursed
myself. This time period is perfect for that because you've got the Bad Batch. They could show up. You've already got Temessu Morrison's already ready. He's like, I'll do it, man. I love Star Wars again.
He's down.
We can see Ahsoka. We can see the Ghost Crew, maybe.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
possibilities.
There's a lot of possibilities. I mean, you can throw in so much in this time period. I know we talked about Kenobi, like when Jade and I, when we were in that time frame. You can only do so much with a character within a specific time frame when you're very much limited. And of course, we know when this guy dies. We know about this whole thing. So for time wise, you can only do so much with the character, but also you have all these other things you can branch out with. And I think what's cool is that, like you said, he might not be the only character that's a main character. He could leave, and then they could just say, okay, well, we won't call it, his name anymore, won't be the show, but we'll do another character, and we'll just branch it off from there. You could do that, and there's a lot that could be done.
I mean, you could even just do like, hey, this is the Andor division. This is the Andor intelligence division.
Yeah.
We named it in honor of the guy who, sacrificed everything to get the Death Star plans off the planet.
There's a lot. You could do a lot.
My head is spinning. Yeah.
Which I think it's great. This is going to be an interesting series. I'm hoping it's a darker tone. Any final thoughts you guys might have?
No, I'm just looking forward to it. I'm glad that we have what we have to go on, but I'm also glad that we have
so little.
Yeah, I'm glad that it's limited to some degree. Like, at least some mystery. Like, oh man, I'm just excited.
In a world
to see
where
every
background character has a 3-page article on Wikipedia, it's kind of nice to not know something about certain characters yet.
I can't wait till the Cantina band gets their own spin-off show and we
God.
get to watch like their origin stories, and
it's gonna be a biopic.
You joke, but there was an episode of Star Wars Visions that was basically that.
For me, I'm excited to see the interactions between the two facets. I don't even say two facets. There's just a lot of different classes for people that are involved in the rebellion, and I think that's a really cool thing to see, that it brings so many different people from different backgrounds together. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see those that actually do physical fighting interact with those that verbally fight, if that makes sense. I really want to see those interactions and how they kind of create and form and mold this rebellion into the alliance, and how all that stuff works.
Kevin really hates politicians get smacked.
Look. I studied this stuff, so like I'm so much more interested in that, and hey, eat the rich, like fuck that, I love it, let's go. I just really want to see how it works. I want to see how they're gonna go about it. Plus, I mean, I really am excited to watch all of this and then rewatch Rogue One and be even more depressed than I was before. So I want more reasons to be depressed, guys. That's what Star Wars is. It's just depression, space depression.
And on that fun note of depression, we're going to wrap it up. Speaking of depression, I'm sad we have to go, but it was great to be here. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please take a minute to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us grow the show. And be sure to connect with us on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter at lore_party. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.